The stars looked peaceful through the viewing port of the UHS Liberty as Captain Jake Morrison watched them drift past. His ship carried 50,000 human souls toward their new home on a planet they called New Eden. After 6 months of travel, through the cold darkness of space, they were finally close to their destination. The colonists had packed everything they owned into storage containers, dreaming of farms and cities they would build under an alien sun. Dr. Lisa Chang stood beside Morrison at the bridge, checking her tablet for the 100th time that day. She had spent years studying New Eden from Earth, analyzing every detail the survey teams had sent back. The planet was perfect for human life with clean water, breathable air, and rich soil that would grow Earth crops. She smiled as she thought about the children who would run through fields of corn and wheat in just a few more days. Commander Steve Johnson walked across the bridge carrying his daily security report. His men had been training the colonists in basic safety procedures during the long journey. Most of the settlers were farmers, teachers, and shop owners who had never held a weapon in their lives. They trusted that the galaxy was a safe place for humans because that was what the leaders on Earth had always told them. Chief Engineer Amy Rodriguez climbed up from the engine room, wiping grease from her hands with a dirty cloth. The Liberty was an old ship, built back when humans first joined the Galactic Council 200 years ago. She had kept the ancient engines running through sheer determination and endless repairs. The ship groaned and shook with every jump through hyperspace, but it had brought them this far without breaking down completely. The Galactic Council controlled everything in known space with rules that every species had to follow. Humans were considered a minor race with limited rights and small territories. They paid taxes to the Council, followed orders from alien officials, and accepted whatever planets the Council decided to give them. The Zephyrian Empire and their Krulon allies made most of the important decisions while species like humans simply obeyed. Morrison had served in the Council's fleet for 20 years before taking command of the Liberty. He had watched alien officers treat human crews like servants, giving them the worst assignments and smallest rations. Human colonies were taxed heavily to fund alien expansion projects, and human ships were restricted to old technology that broke down constantly. Still, the human government on Earth insisted that cooperation with the Council was their only path to survival. The bridge alarm suddenly began ringing as 3 massive ships appeared on their sensors. Dr. Chang looked at her screens in confusion, because the vessels were not supposed to be there according to their flight plan. The ships were Zephyrian warships, each one 10 times larger than the Liberty, with enough firepower to destroy a small moon. Their dark hulls bristled with weapons that glowed with dangerous energy. Commander Johnson immediately went to his station and began checking the ship's defensive systems, though he knew they were useless against such powerful enemies. The Liberty had only basic shields and a few small guns meant for shooting space debris. Chief Engineer Rodriguez ran back toward the engine room, knowing that their only hope might be to run if the aliens decided to attack them. A cold voice spoke through the communication system in the harsh language of the Zephyrian Empire before switching to broken human speech. Human Vessel Liberty, you will stop your engines and prepare for boarding inspection. Any resistance will result in immediate destruction of your ship and all aboard. Morrison felt his stomach drop as he realized something was terribly wrong. The Liberty had proper travel documents and permits from the Council for their journey to New Eden. Their colony charter had been approved by 5 different alien bureaucracies over the past 2 years. There should be no reason for a military inspection in what was supposed to be empty space. The largest Zephyrian ship moved closer to the Liberty, while its smaller escorts took positions that would prevent any escape. A docking tube extended from the alien vessel and clamped onto the Liberty's hull, with a sound like breaking metal. Morrison ordered his crew to cooperate fully because he knew that 50,000 innocent colonists would die if the Zephyrians decided the humans were being hostile. Admiral Vexka entered the Liberty's main docking bay surrounded by 20 armed soldiers. The Zephyrian was nearly 8 feet tall with scales that looked like green metal armor and eyes like burning coals. His soldiers carried plasma rifles that could burn through the ship's hull in seconds. They moved through the corridors of the Liberty as if they owned everything they saw. Morrison met the alien delegation in the ship's main conference room along with Dr. Chang and Commander Johnson. Admiral Vexka did not bother with polite greetings or explanations as he activated a holographic display showing the New Eden system. The planet that 50,000 humans had traveled 6 months to reach was now marked with Krulon symbols indicating mining operations. The planet you call New Eden has been reassigned to the Krulon Collective for resource extraction, Admiral Vexka announced in a voice like grinding stone. The Council has determined that mining operations will produce more value than human agriculture. Your colonists will be transferred to Krulon facilities as contract workers to help with the extraction process. Dr. Chang stood up from her chair, with her face pale with shock. But we have legal colony rights to New Eden. Our charter was approved by the Council itself. These people sold everything they owned to come here. They have families and children who need a safe place to live. The Zephyrian admiral looked at the human woman as if she were an insect making noise. Human colony rights are secondary to Council economic interests. The Krulon Collective requires workers for dangerous mining operations that their own species cannot perform. Humans are expendable and easily replaced. Morrison felt his hands begin to shake with rage as he thought about the farmers and teachers aboard his ship being forced to work in alien mines until they died from exhaustion or accidents. Commander Johnson stepped forward with his hand near his weapon, but Morrison shook his head slightly to warn him against doing anything that would get them all killed. "What if we refuse?" Morrison asked quietly, already knowing the answer but needing to hear it spoken aloud. Admiral Vexka smiled with teeth like broken glass. "Then your ship and everyone aboard will be destroyed for interfering with Council operations. The choice is simple, human. Give us your people, or watch them all burn." Zephyrian soldiers began moving through the Liberty's corridors, herding frightened colonists into cargo bays like animals being prepared for slaughter. Children cried for their parents while old people collapsed from fear and stress. The dreams of 50,000 humans were being crushed by alien greed, and the Council's complete indifference to human suffering. Morrison watched from the bridge as his people were loaded into Zephyrian transport ships bound for the hell of Krulon mining facilities. Dr. Chang stood beside him with tears on her face, whispering the question that many humans across the galaxy were beginning to ask: how much more can we take? 6 months passed like a nightmare across human space as reports of alien cruelty reached every colony and settlement. Governor Pete Williams stood in his office on New Terra, looking at medical reports that made his blood run cold. The Krulon mining operations had dumped toxic waste into the planet's main river system, poisoning the water supply for 3 million human settlers. The hospitals were overflowing with sick children and dying elders, while the alien overseers refused to provide clean water or medical help. Dr. Maria Santos ran the largest school on New Terra, where 800 human children came to learn each day. She watched helplessly as more students became sick from the contaminated water, their small bodies unable to fight off the alien toxins. The Krulon officials told her that human health was not their concern, and that the mining operations would continue no matter how many people died. On the industrial world of Haven, factory supervisor Ben Clark witnessed horrors that would haunt him for the rest of his life. The Zephyrian overseers worked human laborers 18 hours a day in plasma refineries where temperatures could melt steel. Men and women collapsed from exhaustion and heat stroke while alien guards beat anyone who tried to help them. The work quotas were impossible to meet, but failure meant reduced food rations for entire families. Maintenance Chief Carol Thompson tried to improve safety conditions in the factories by installing better ventilation systems and protective equipment. The Zephyrian overseers arrested her for interfering with galactic commerce and sentenced her to 6 months of hard labor in the worst part of the refinery. Her crime was caring more about human lives than alien profits. Captain Morrison now commanded a small fleet of refugee ships that moved between human colonies, trying to evacuate the most desperate cases. His vessel had been renamed from Liberty to Hope, though hope seemed like a cruel joke in the face of such systematic oppression. Every day brought new reports of human suffering while the Galactic Council ignored their pleas for help or protection. Lieutenant Tony Rivers served as Morrison's first officer aboard the Hope, coordinating rescue operations across dozens of worlds. He had seen entire human communities destroyed by alien strip mining and industrial accidents, that could have been prevented with basic safety measures. The aliens treated human lives as completely worthless, caring only about extraction quotas and profit margins. Dr. Chang had become Morrison's chief advisor after the New Eden disaster, using her scientific training to analyze patterns in the alien occupation. She discovered that the Zephyrians and Krulons were not just exploiting humans randomly, but following a systematic plan to reduce human population through overwork, malnutrition, and environmental poisoning. The aliens were committing slow genocide while the Council looked the other way. The breaking point came when the civilian transport ship New Hope was destroyed by a Zephyrian patrol while carrying medical supplies to plague victims on New Terra. The ship's captain had proper travel permits and was broadcasting emergency medical codes, but the Zephyrian commander decided to make an example of humans who moved without specific permission. All 3,000 people aboard the New Hope died when the alien warship's plasma cannons turned their vessel into glowing debris. Among the dead were 500 children being evacuated from the worst-hit areas of New Terra, along with doctors and nurses who had volunteered to help treat the sick. Entire families disappeared in seconds, their only crime being human in a galaxy that no longer cared about their survival. The Zephyrian official responsible for the attack was promoted for his decisive action against unauthorized human movement. Morrison received the news while docked at Harmony Station, a small trading post that served as a meeting point for human refugee operations. He stood in his cabin staring at the casualty reports, feeling something cold and hard form in his chest where his heart used to be. Lieutenant Rivers found him there an hour later, watching his captain's face transform from grief into something far more dangerous. Dr. Chang entered Morrison's cabin carrying a data pad filled with classified intelligence that human operatives had gathered across the galaxy. She had spent months analyzing patterns of alien oppression and discovered that the systematic cruelty went far beyond simple economic exploitation. The Galactic Council's dominant powers were deliberately working to eliminate or enslave dozens of species they considered inferior or threatening. The intelligence reports showed concentration camps on 17 different worlds where non-conforming species were worked to death in industrial facilities. Entire civilizations had been wiped out for refusing to surrender their natural resources to alien corporations. The Zephyrian Empire and Krulon Collective had turned genocide into a profitable business model while maintaining the pretense of civilized galactic governance. Morrison read through the files with growing horror and rage, realizing that humanity's suffering was just one small part of a vast machine designed to crush anyone who could not fight back. The Galactic Council was not a government, but a protection racket run by the strongest species to exploit everyone else. Peace and cooperation were lies used to keep victims from organizing resistance. "How long have you known about this?" Morrison asked Dr. Chang as he finished reading the intelligence reports. "Some of us have suspected for decades," she replied quietly. "But we could never prove it until now. Human intelligence officers throughout the galaxy have been documenting everything in secret, waiting for someone with the authority to act on the information." Morrison walked to his cabin window and looked out at the stars, thinking about all the human children who had died from poisoned water and overwork, while their parents begged alien officials for mercy that would never come. He thought about the 3,000 innocents who had burned aboard the New Hope for the crime of trying to help sick people. He thought about 50,000 colonists working themselves to death in Krulon mines because they had dared to dream of a better life. Lieutenant Rivers watched his captain make a decision that would change the course of galactic history. Morrison turned away from the window with eyes like ice and activated his communication system to send encrypted messages to every human ship, colony, and settlement in known space. The messages would take weeks to reach their destinations through the slow channels that avoided alien monitoring, but they would eventually find every human leader who still had the courage to fight. Dr. Chang helped Morrison encode the messages, using a cipher that only humans would understand, based on references to Earth history and culture that aliens had never bothered to learn. The code would activate sleeper cells and resistance networks that had been building in secret for generations, waiting for the moment when humanity finally decided to stop accepting abuse from creatures who saw them as expendable tools. The message that went out across human space contained only 3 words: but they carried the weight of 2 centuries of accumulated rage and determination. Operation Quiet Storm. Morrison knew that sending those words would likely get him killed along with everyone who received them. But he no longer cared about his own survival. The aliens had made their choice when they decided that human lives were worthless. Now they would learn what happened when a species with nothing left to lose finally stopped playing by rules designed to keep them helpless. In hidden facilities across human space, men and women who had spent their entire lives pretending to be weak and helpless began preparing for war. The galaxy had pushed humanity too far and was about to discover that the quiet, peaceful humans they had been exploiting were capable of things that would make nightmares seem like pleasant dreams. The galaxy burned as Operation Quiet Storm revealed the true scope of human military preparation. What the aliens had dismissed as a merchant fleet suddenly became the most advanced military force in known space. Captain Morrison led the primary assault fleet from his flagship Vengeance, while Admiral Knox coordinated simultaneous strikes from within the Galactic Defense Fleet itself, using her access to alien command systems to cripple their defenses before they could respond. Commander Gary Phillips commanded a squadron of human warships disguised as mining vessels that struck deep into Krulon space, targeting the industrial complexes where human slaves had been worked to death for generations. His ships moved like ghosts through alien sensor networks, appearing without warning to destroy facilities that had tortured millions of innocent people. The precision of the attacks demonstrated that humans had been planning this campaign for decades. Colonel Nancy Davis led ground forces that liberated human colonies across 17 different star systems, her soldiers equipped with powered armor and energy weapons that made them nearly invincible against alien security forces. The Zephyrian and Krulon troops discovered that the weak, helpless humans they had been oppressing were actually elite warriors who had been training in secret while pretending to be harmless civilians. The aliens quickly realized that humanity had not been working alone during their centuries of apparent submission. Agent Kevin Brown and his operative Julie Reed had spent years recruiting oppressed species throughout the galaxy, building a network of rebels who shared humanity's hatred for the Council's tyrannical rule. The Altarian bird people and the crystalline vegan collective joined human forces, providing ships and soldiers for the liberation campaign. Zephyrian Supreme Commander Keth Zor tried desperately to rally the Council's military forces, but human intelligence networks had so thoroughly infiltrated alien governments that his every move was anticipated and countered. The spy networks that humans had built while serving as translators, clerks, and maintenance workers proved more valuable than entire battle fleets. The turning point came at the Battle of Centaurus Gate, where Morrison's flagship Vengeance faced the massive Zephyrian dreadnought Cosmic Dominator in single combat. The alien vessel was 5 miles long and carried enough firepower to destroy entire planets, while the human ship appeared to be just another converted cargo hauler. Keth Zor expected an easy victory that would demonstrate alien superiority and end the human rebellion. Instead, he witnessed technology that seemed to violate the basic laws of physics as the Vengeance phased in and out of normal space, like a ghost ship from ancient legends. Morrison's tactical officer Commander Alex Turner coordinated quantum strikes that allowed their weapons to bypass shields and armor entirely, hitting the alien dreadnought's internal systems directly without damaging its outer hull. The Cosmic Dominator's crew watched in terror as their ship's vital systems began failing one by one, while their weapons passed harmlessly through the human vessel that flickered between dimensions. The massive dreadnought was completely helpless against an enemy that could exist partially outside of normal reality, striking from angles that should have been impossible to access. Morrison stood on his bridge watching the alien flagship die, as its engines overloaded and its weapons system shut down permanently. Engineer Linda Harris reported that the displacement technology was working perfectly, allowing human ships to fight battles that their enemies could not even comprehend, let alone win. The Vengeance had destroyed the most powerful warship in the galaxy without taking a single point of damage. The Battle of Centaurus Gate became a complete rout as human reinforcements arrived through quantum tunnels that allowed instant travel across vast distances. Ships commanded by officers like Captain Foster and Commander Phillips surrounded the surviving alien vessels, offering them the same choice that humans had been given for centuries: surrender or die. General Roy Mitchell led the ground assault. On Zephyrian military bases, his troops moving through alien defenses like they were made of paper. The powered armor that human soldiers wore was based on technology stolen from alien laboratories and improved through decades of secret research. Enemy weapons that should have been deadly proved completely ineffective against human defensive systems. The psychological impact of human restraint proved more devastating than total destruction would have been. When human forces captured alien military installations, they destroyed weapons and equipment, while leaving civilian areas completely untouched. Alien populations watched in confused terror as their supposedly primitive enemies demonstrated technological and tactical superiority while maintaining moral standards that their own leaders had abandoned centuries ago. On the Krulon homeworld, Admiral Janet Lewis led a fleet of human warships that surrounded the planet and demanded the immediate release of all human slaves. The Krulon government tried to use human prisoners as hostages, threatening to execute them if the siege continued. Admiral Lewis responded by disabling every military satellite in the system within 10 minutes, demonstrating that human technology could reach any target they chose to destroy. The Krulon leaders realized that their hostages were worthless against an enemy that could strike anywhere with weapons they could not defend against. They released the human prisoners and begged for mercy from people they had been torturing for generations. Admiral Lewis granted their request for humanitarian reasons, though many of her officers wanted to exact revenge for the suffering their people had endured. Human forces swept through the galaxy like an unstoppable tide, liberating oppressed species and destroying the infrastructure of tyranny that the Council had built over millennia. The aliens discovered that humans had learned from every defeat, analyzed every weakness, and prepared countermeasures for every tactic that had been used against them. Captain Morrison's fleet reached the outskirts of Zephyrian space within 2 months of the war's beginning, having destroyed or captured every military installation between human territory and the alien capital world. The supposedly primitive humans had demonstrated strategic planning and technological capabilities that exceeded anything the galactic powers had imagined possible. Dr. Chang worked aboard the Vengeance analyzing captured alien technology and finding it primitive compared to the weapons that humans had developed in secret. The aliens had become complacent after centuries of easy victories over weaker species, while humans had been forced to innovate and improve just to survive. The oppressors had made themselves vulnerable by underestimating their victims. The surviving alien leaders began to understand that they were facing an enemy unlike any they had encountered before. Humans fought with precision and purpose rather than blind rage, targeting military objectives while protecting civilians, even alien civilians who had supported the oppressive regime. This restraint made them more terrifying than any berserker army because it proved that human victory came from superior planning and technology rather than simple brutality. As human fleets approached the core systems of both the Zephyrian Empire and Krulon Collective, panic spread through alien space. The species that had ruled the galaxy through fear and oppression found themselves helpless against former slaves who had learned to fight smarter rather than harder. The galaxy trembled as humanity demonstrated what happened when a truly advanced civilization finally decided to stop pretending to be weak. The galaxy's rulers remained completely unaware of the storm building around them as humans began their quiet preparations for war. On Earth, Admiral Helen Knox sat in her office at Galactic Defense Fleet Headquarters, carefully reviewing personnel files and transfer requests. As the highest-ranking human in the alien military structure, she had access to classified information about fleet movements and strategic planning that would prove invaluable in the coming conflict. Knox had spent 30 years climbing through the ranks of an organization that barely tolerated human participation, enduring constant insults and discrimination, while secretly building a network of human officers in key positions. Captain Danny Cole led a team of human engineers who worked in the fleet's shipyards, officially maintaining alien vessels, but actually gathering intelligence about enemy capabilities and weaknesses. Dr. Chang had returned to Earth after receiving Morrison's coded message, traveling through legitimate diplomatic channels to avoid suspicion. She met with Chief Scientist Paul Martinez in a secret facility hidden beneath the ruins of an old subway system in what used to be New York City. For 2 centuries, while publicly accepting their inferior status in galactic society, human scientists had been conducting advanced research in laboratories that the aliens never knew existed. Martinez led Dr. Chang through corridors lined with experimental technology that would have shocked the Galactic Council's military leaders. The humans had developed quantum displacement drives that allowed ships to phase in and out of normal space, making them nearly impossible to target or track. Their plasma weapons could cut through any known shield technology like a knife through paper, while their armor systems could absorb and redirect energy attacks. "How long have we been working on this?" Dr. Chang asked as she examined a prototype displacement drive that hummed with barely contained power. "Since the day we joined the council and realized they would never treat us as equals," Martinez replied. "Every human scientist, engineer, and technician has contributed something to the project. We've been stealing alien technology, improving it, and combining it with our own innovations for generations." On the mining world of Iron Ridge, factory worker Sandra Lee received Morrison's message through a communication network that the Krulon overseers had never suspected existed. She had spent 10 years organizing human workers while pretending to be a model prisoner, building trust and loyalty among people who had given up hope of ever seeing freedom again. The Krulons thought humans were too broken and demoralized to organize any kind of resistance. Security Chief Mike Turner had been mapping every Zephyrian and Krulon military installation for decades, while serving as a guard at various alien facilities. He knew the location of every weapons depot, command center, and communication relay in human space. The aliens trusted him because he had never shown any sign of rebellious behavior, always following orders with perfect obedience, while secretly planning their destruction. Across 50 different worlds, humans in positions of trust and responsibility received Morrison's activation code and began implementing plans they had rehearsed in their minds for years. Teachers like Maria Santos organized parents and students for coordinated action. Engineers like Amy Rodriguez prepared to sabotage critical infrastructure. Medical workers began stockpiling supplies for the casualties that would inevitably follow. The aliens' first hint that something was wrong came when human cargo ships began appearing in restricted star systems where civilian vessels were not allowed to travel. Zephyrian patrol commanders reported unusual activity, but their superiors dismissed the reports as routine smuggling or navigation errors. Admiral Thexmore commanded the largest Zephyrian battle fleet and refused to believe that humans could pose any kind of military threat. Commander Yixval tried to warn his superiors about coordinated human movements that seemed too organized to be coincidental, but the alien command structure was too arrogant to take human capabilities seriously. They had spent 2 centuries treating humans like primitive animals, and could not imagine that their victims might have been planning revenge all along. The human cargo ships were actually heavily modified warships, disguised with false identification, codes, and fake cargo manifests. Captain Kelly Foster commanded one of these vessels, the Retribution, which appeared to be carrying agricultural supplies but was actually armed with experimental weapons that could destroy entire alien battle groups. Her crew had trained for this moment their entire adult lives while pretending to be simple merchant sailors. Morrison's network activated simultaneously across human space as resistance cells that had been dormant for generations suddenly came to life. The aliens discovered that their human workers, guards, and servants had been secretly documenting every detail of alien military operations while appearing to be loyal and submissive. Every human who had ever been trusted with access to alien facilities had been gathering intelligence for the resistance. The first sign that humanity was no longer helpless came when the Retribution encountered a Zephyrian patrol fleet in the Centaurus system. Admiral Kexnor commanded 5 heavy cruisers and expected to destroy the lone human vessel within minutes. His ships opened fire with plasma cannons that should have vaporized the Retribution before it could respond, but their weapons passed harmlessly through empty space where the human ship had been a moment before. Captain Foster's experimental displacement drive allowed her ship to phase out of normal reality, just long enough to avoid the alien attack, then reappear behind the Zephyrian fleet with weapons charged and ready. Her plasma cannons cut through alien shields like they were made of tissue paper. gutting 3 enemy cruisers before they could react to the impossible situation they were facing. The 2 surviving Zephyrian ships tried to escape, but found their engines disabled by human weapons that somehow bypassed all their defensive systems. Captain Foster opened communication channels to the crippled alien vessels and spoke in perfect Zephyrian military language that she had learned while pretending to be an ignorant cargo hauler. "This is Captain Foster of the Human Liberation Fleet," she announced to the stunned alien crews. "You are witnessing the end of galactic oppression and the beginning of human justice. Surrender your vessels and prepare to face judgment for your crimes against innocent people." Admiral Kexnor could not believe what he was hearing, as his supposedly primitive enemy demanded his surrender using technology that exceeded anything in the Galactic Council's arsenal. His remaining ships were completely helpless against weapons they could not understand or defend against, piloted by a species they had dismissed as barely intelligent animals. News of the Retribution's victory spread through both human and alien communication networks within hours. Other human ships across the galaxy began revealing their true nature as the merchant fleet transformed into a military force that had been hiding in plain sight for decades. The aliens realized too late that they had been completely infiltrated by an enemy they had underestimated to a fatal degree. Morrison broadcast a message across all galactic frequencies from his flagship Hope, which had also been secretly modified for military operations during its months of refugee work. His words were heard by every species in known space, including the council leaders who had spent centuries believing that humans would never dare to challenge their authority. "For 200 years we have endured your oppression in silence," Morrison said in a voice that carried the weight of accumulated human rage. "We have watched you murder our children, poison our worlds, and treat us as expendable slaves. We gave you peace, and you responded with genocide. Today, that ends. You wanted to see what humans are capable of when pushed beyond endurance. Now you will learn what we do when we stop holding back." 3 months after the war began, the Galactic Council faced complete collapse as human forces closed in on the capital worlds of their former oppressors. The Zephyrian Empire's home planet was surrounded by Captain Morrison's Liberation Fleet, while Admiral Knox led human ships through the core systems, dismantling military installations with surgical precision. The aliens who had once considered humans barely intelligent enough to be useful slaves now faced a species that had surpassed them in every measure of technological and military capability. Supreme Commander Keth Zor made a desperate decision to strike at Earth itself, gathering the Council's remaining fleet for a final assault on humanity's birth world. He believed that destroying the human home planet would break their morale and force them to negotiate from a position of weakness. His intelligence officers had assured him that Earth was lightly defended and vulnerable to orbital bombardment. The 1. Alien fleet arrived in the Sol system expecting to find a primitive world, protected by obsolete defensive systems. Instead, they discovered that Earth was surrounded by orbital platforms that made their weapons completely useless. General Patricia Wells commanded the planet's defense grid from a command station hidden beneath the surface, calmly informing the alien fleet that they had 30 seconds to surrender before the orbital platforms opened fire. Keth Zor refused to believe that humans could have built defenses capable of stopping his fleet, ordering his ships to attack the planet despite the warnings. The alien plasma cannons fired massive energy beams toward Earth's surface, only to watch their weapons disappear into shimmering force fields that absorbed the energy and converted it into power for the human defensive systems. The orbital platforms returned fire with weapons that the aliens had never seen before, tearing through their shields and armor as if they were made of paper. Keth Zor's flagship was crippled within seconds by energy beams that somehow passed through his defensive systems to strike the ship's internal structure directly. His entire fleet was helpless against defensive technology that rendered their most powerful weapons useless. Morrison arrived in the Sol system aboard his flagship Vengeance as the alien fleet surrendered unconditionally, their ships floating, dead in space with their weapon systems permanently disabled. The Supreme Commander, who had ordered the genocide of countless species, now begged for mercy from the humans he had tried to exterminate. Morrison accepted the surrender but insisted that all alien war criminals would face justice for their crimes. The Final confrontation took place aboard the Vengeance in the same conference room where Admiral Vexka had once forced humans to surrender their colonists to Krulon slavery. The surviving leaders of the Galactic Council sat across from Morrison and Dr. Chang, their arrogant confidence replaced by desperate fear as they realized their victims had become their conquerors. Admiral Vexka looked like a broken shell of his former self as he faced the human captain he had humiliated aboard the Liberty. The scales that had once gleamed like armor were now dull with defeat, and his burning eyes had become empty holes that reflected nothing but despair. He knew that Morrison had every right to execute him for the countless atrocities he had committed against innocent humans. Dr. Chang presented the peace treaty that would reshape galactic civilization, but the document was not a list of human demands for revenge and domination. Instead, it was a constitution for a new galactic order based on equality and mutual respect among all intelligent species. The former oppressors discovered that humans did not seek to replace alien tyranny with human tyranny. Morrison explained humanity's vision for the galaxy's future as the alien leaders listened in stunned silence. The new Galactic Federation would give every species an equal voice in government, regardless of their military power or technological advancement. Scientific knowledge would be shared freely among all members, and stronger species would be required to protect weaker ones rather than exploit them for profit. The treaty included provisions for war crimes tribunals where alien officials who had committed genocide would face justice, but also rehabilitation programs for species that agreed to abandon their oppressive practices. Morrison made it clear that humans wanted to build a better galaxy, rather than simply punish their former enemies for past crimes. Commander Johnson, the former security chief who had witnessed the first Zephyrian humiliation aboard the Liberty, now stood as Earth's new ambassador to the Galactic Council. The man who had once been forced to watch helplessly as alien soldiers herded human families into slave ships, now spoke for his species as an equal among equals in the new galactic order. The signing ceremony took place on Earth in a hall built from materials donated by dozens of liberated species. Representatives from across the galaxy watched as former enemies became partners in building a civilization based on cooperation rather than conquest. The Altarian bird people sang songs of freedom, while the crystalline Vegan collective projected light patterns that represented hope and renewal. Admiral Vexka signed the treaty with hands that shook from more than age, knowing that he was witnessing the end of an era where might made right, and the strong preyed upon the weak. The Zephyrian Empire that had ruled through fear and brutality would become just another member of a federation dedicated to protecting the rights of all intelligent life. Morrison's final log entry reflected on the price that freedom had demanded and the responsibility that came with power. He stood on the bridge of the Vengeance looking out at the stars, remembering the terrified colonists who had been taken from the Liberty and the children who had died from poisoned water on New Terra. Their sacrifices had not been in vain because they had led to a galaxy where such atrocities could never happen again. The captain who had once been forced to surrender his people to alien slavers now commanded the respect of every species in known space, not because humans had proven they could destroy their enemies, but because they had chosen to save them instead. The galaxy had trembled when humans said enough, but not from fear of human weapons or human cruelty. The trembling had come from hope, as oppressed species across the galaxy realized that freedom was possible and that the strong could choose to protect the weak rather than exploit them. Humanity had not conquered the galaxy through superior firepower or ruthless tactics, but through superior ideals that inspired other species to demand better from their leaders and themselves. The new Galactic Federation faced many challenges, as former enemies learned to work together for common goals. But the foundation had been laid for a civilization that valued justice over power and cooperation over conquest. The humans who had once been dismissed as primitive and worthless had given the galaxy something it had never possessed: a government that served all its citizens equally. Morrison's final words were heard across human space and beyond as he addressed the species that had joined humanity in building a better future. "We did not fight this war to prove that humans were superior to other species," he said quietly. "We fought to prove that all species deserve to be treated with dignity and respect. The galaxy trembled not because we brought destruction, but because we brought hope. Now we must prove worthy of the trust that others have placed in us.